Well, it's been a week, guys. It's been a really difficult week. Having war in the Middle East break out in such a devastating, horrifying, heartbreaking way, which is searing its way around the world, and we as people of faith cry out in lament. What else can we do? We cry out in lament. And as we cry out, our spirits join with the Spirit of Jesus as he came near that same city and he looked over it and he wept. He wept and he said, even if you today would only know the things that make for peace, if you would just recognize the things that make for peace. You see, Jesus lived in a world, he ministered and he taught in a world that looked somewhat like what we're seeing today. A world under military occupation, people losing land and families and their life savings to poverty and debt and brutal violence. So how is it that that same Jesus was able to look over his group of friends gathered in that city and say, don't worry about anything. It's going to be okay. God's got this. Just look at the abundant wildflowers. Look at the grasses. Look at the birds in the air. They're not worrying. And look how God is taking care of them. And then we hear from Paul, also no stranger to the brutality of empire, saying, pour out your lavish gifts. Pour out yourselves to one another, because that's the way God is with you. Generous blessings, astonishing blessings, day in and day out. How are these guys talking about such a just and generous God living in the world in which they live? And we today, in the midst of that constant news cycle that seems to confirm that our world is nothing but scarcity and struggle, I think these scriptures can seem confusing or even tone deaf. But we as people of faith are called to move from our lament, which is appropriate, to our prayers for peace, also appropriate, and rely on this generous vision because it is the way of faith. It's that mindset of trusting in a just and generous God, just like Josh was talking about this morning. So in the midst of all that is unfolding in our world today, as it was then, we have to ask the question honestly, how can we live lives of generosity and service, leaning into that core value of generosity, sharing ourselves in a world that seems bent on scarcity and lack? How indeed? The answer is kind of simple, even if it's not simple to live. It begins and ends with your mindset. That is the set of beliefs that shape the way you make sense of the world and of yourself, how you think and how you feel and how you behave in any situation. Biblical scholar Tim Mackey explains it this way, and I found it so helpful I wanted to share it with you. He says, in the picture of the world that we find in the Bible, from Genesis and the Garden of Eden through the Psalms, which we heard Paul reciting today, we see this creation as an expression of God's generous love. It's like a party that God is hosting, a generous party where everything is flowing and you don't have to worry about anything. And we're the guests of this party. And we're invited to this world of opportunity and abundance, and we're called to keep the party going. And who doesn't like a good party? We're called to keep the party going and to spread God's goodness. And it's such a beautiful picture, but it's not the picture of the world that we live in, is it? It feels like a nice idea. But we see scarcity and struggle, not abundance. And so then we go back and we say, what was Jesus and Paul? What were they thinking? They viewed the world in the way the Hebrew scriptures present it. And that claims that scarcity is actually not our problem. Scarcity is really not caused, by lack of resources. Scarcity is not caused by lack of resources. The problem is actually our mindset that God cannot be trusted. And when we feel that love cannot be trusted, any circumstance in our life can be an opportunity to see lack and to dive into that belief that we better take matters into our own hands because God cannot be trusted. We start to think, well, I don't know, maybe God is holding out on me, and maybe there isn't enough, and maybe I need to take matters into my own hand. And then once we are deceived into that mindset of scarcity, we justify the impulse to take care of ourselves and the people right around us before anyone else. And that leads to envy and anger and violence and a world where it seems like there absolutely is not enough. And then what happens to that generous, wonderful, overflowing party? It turns into a battlefield pretty quickly. But our faith invites us to live by a different story, one that is built on trust, on God's goodness and love. And that is the foundational mindset that allowed Jesus to utter those words that are so beloved and comforting to us. Don't worry. Don't worry about your life. Today has troubles, okay, but look how God is providing. Do you see the birds worrying? Do you see the flowers and the grasses worrying? God's going to take so much more care of you. Jesus lives with the conviction that there is enough, that God is a generous host and can be trusted. And this mindset is what allows him to live generously and sacrificially, even with his enemies. And that's how, in the midst of all hell breaking loose, then and now, he could even dare to say, don't be anxious. Don't worry. But seek God's kingdom first, and all these things will be given to you. Seek his kingdom, as Donna sang. Friends, this is more than just optimism, which sees forward to a better way. This is a deep and abiding trust in what love wills and what love does, rather than believing in what scarcity wills and what fear does. This is in the ability to choose to see the peace and purpose that we long for. It's available now, even now, because God's abundance is real. Just look outside. It can be trusted, even when we aren't sure. Even when we say what's actually happening feels like proof that that's not true, when really all that it means is that we don't believe it could be true. Love calls us to see the abundance all around us, the enoughness. But at the end of the day, the choice is up to us. It's a choice that we must make. As author Walter Brueggemann writes, our faith calls us every day to be deciding between the narrative of scarcity and fear, greed and violence, or the narrative of abundance, courage, generosity, and peace. And we have to keep remaking that decision, because the dominant narrative, guess what, is scarcity and fear, and it's so powerful, so pervading. We have to decide and decide and redecide again and again. Now, that decision making is not going to create peace in the Middle East, even if it does help us to understand a little bit about what's going on. But it absolutely does determine how you will interpret and to respond to all of your life's situations, from the most horrifying to the seemingly inconsequential. Our life, our faith, calls us to this choice every single day. And maybe that's where it gets dicey, because we're so bad at making choices. We're afraid at making decisions. Maybe not the big decisions of life. Maybe we're okay with those. But it's like those countless daily choices that we have to make every day, deciding what to wear, how to function in our job, what to order in a restaurant, what to do with our day, with our children, with our partner. We don't want to be wrong. We're afraid that we'll make a mistake. And we don't want our potentially wrong choice to indicate that there's something wrong with us, the chooser of the wrong choice. So don't be surprised if you have difficulty consistently trusting in this abundant love of our Creator. I would say just this. Take notice of the moments in your life when you are able, even if they're just fleeting moments, when you feel yourself relax into the comfort that there is enough, that there will be enough, that you are enough, that enough is enough. And then notice how generosity in all ways flows freely. In a moment, we're going to hear Deb Tonninson speak in our stewardship video of how trust opens her up in so many ways. Take a listen to how it relaxes her and what it leads her to do. But finally, I would offer just this prayer and practice to end this morning. It's something that I've been relying on quite a bit lately, and it was inspired by author Carolyn Meese. It helps to reframe our time, which is not scarce, but it is limited. And when we connect with the reality that we all have a finite number of moments here, though it seems counterintuitive, when we admit that time is limited, it helps us to see every moment as special and sacred. And I have found that this helps to balance the reality of the world as it is with the equally powerful reality of a just and generous Creator. Choose to get up every day and bless your day. Say, I have no idea what my day is going to be, but it is blessed just because I am alive. And don't base your gratitude on your day for what you have or for your circumstances. Don't even base it on what you feel, especially first thing in the morning. But just because you are. Just because you are. Just because you are. And then hold in your heart this prayer. This day in my life will never come again. I will never see the people that I am looking at in exactly this way. I will never see the sun rise again exactly like that, and I will never see that exact sunset. Nothing in my life will ever come again exactly the way it is right now. So, God, I thank you for this moment, for this day. Friends, that choice alone should take out of your heart every bitterness, every fear of scarcity. That choice could shape your day and the life around you with such grace and beauty that it will make you want to see and trust the present with great gratitude and love. May it be so. Amen.